Hello, this is me reading another 50 essays. A Plague of Tics by David Sedaris. Okay. When the teacher asked if she might visit with my mother, I touched my nose 8 times to the surface of my desk. May I take that as a yes? She asked. According to her calculations, I had left my chair 28 times that day. You're up and down like a flea. I turned my back for 2 minutes, and there you are with your tongue pressed against that light switch. Maybe they do that where you come from, but here in my classroom, we don't leave our seats and lick things whenever we please. That is Mrs. Chestnut's light switch, and she likes to keep it dry. Would you like me to come over to your house and put your tongue on your light switches? Would you? I tried to picture her in action, but my shoe was calling. Take me off, it whispered. Tap my heel against your forehead 3 times. Do it now, quick. No one will notice. Well, Mrs. Chestnut raised her faint, penciled eyebrows. I'm asking you a question. Would you or would you not want me licking the light switches in your house? I slipped off my shoe, pretending to examine the imprint of the heel. You're going to hit yourself over the head with that shoe, aren't you? It wasn't hitting. It was tapping. But still, how has she known what I was about to do? Heel marks all over your forehead, she said, answering my silent question. You should take a look in the mirror sometime. Shoes are dirty things. We wear them on our feet to protect ourselves against the soil. It's not healthy to hit ourselves over the head with shoes, is it? I guessed that it was not. Guess? This is not a game to be guessed at. I don't guess that it's dangerous to run into traffic with a paper sack over my head. There's no guesswork involved. These things are facts, not riddles. She sat at her desk, continuing her lecture as she penned a brief letter. I'd like to have a word with your mother. Do you have one? You do have one, don't you? I'm assuming you weren't raised by animals. Is she blind, your mother? Can she see the way you behave, or do you reserve your antiques exclusively for Mrs. Chestnut? She handed me the folded slip of paper. You may go now, and on your way out the door, I'm asking you to please not bathe my light switch with your germ-ridden tongue. It's had a long day. We both have. It was a short distance from the school to our rented house, no more than 637 steps. And on a good day, I could make the trip in an hour, pausing every few feet to tongue a mailbox or touch whichever single leaf or blade of grass demanded my attention. If I were to lose count of my steps, I'd have to return to the school and begin again. Back so soon, the janitor would ask. You just can't get enough of this place, can you? He had it all wrong. I wanted to be at school more than anything. It was getting there that was the problem. I might touch the telephone pole at step 314, and then 15 paces later, worry that I hadn't touched it in exactly the right spot. It needed to be touched again. I let my mind wander for one brief moment, and then doubt had set in, causing me to question not just the telephone pole, but also the lawn ornaments back at step 219. I'd have to go back and lick that concrete mushroom one more time, hoping its guardian wouldn't at once rush from her house shouting, "Get your face out of my toadstool." It might be raining, or maybe I had to go to the bathroom, but running home was not an option. This was a long and complicated process that demanded an oppressive attention to detail. It wasn't that I enjoyed pressing my nose against the scalding hood of a parked car. Pleasure had nothing to do with it. A person had to do these things because nothing was worse than the anguish of not doing them. Bypass that mailbox, and my brain would never for one moment let me forget about it. I might be sitting at the dinner table, daring myself not to think about it, and the thought would revisit my mind. Don't think about it. But it would already be too late, and I knew then exactly what I had to do. Excusing myself to go to the bathroom, I walk out the front door and return to that mailbox. Not just touching, but jabbing, practically pounding on the thing, because I thought I hated it so much. What I really hated, of course, was my mind. There must have been an off switch somewhere, but I was damned if I could find it. I didn't remember things being this way back north. Our family had been transferred from Endicott, New York, to Raleigh, North Carolina. That was a word used by the people in IBM, transferred. A new home was under construction, but until it was finished, we were confined to a rental property built to resemble a plantation house. The building sat in a treeless, spalding yard, its white columns promising a majesty the interior failed to deliver. The front door opened onto a dark, narrow hallway lined with bedrooms not much larger than the mattresses that furnished them. Our kitchen was located on the second floor, alongside the living room, its picture window offering a view of the cinder block wall built to hold back the tide of mud generated by the neighboring dirt mound. Our own little corner of hell, my mother said, fanning herself with one of the shingles littered the front yard. Depressing as it was, arriving at the front stoop of the house meant that I had completed the first leg of that bitter-tasting journey to my bedroom. Once home, I would touch the front door 7 times with each elbow, a task made much difficult if there was someone else around. "Why don't you try the knob?" my sister Lisa would say. That's what the rest of us do, and it seems to work for us." Inside the house, there were switches and doorstops to be acknowledged. My bedroom was right there off the hallway, but first I had business to tend to. After kissing the 4th, 8th, and 12th carpeted stair, I wiped my cat hair off my lips and proceeded to the kitchen, where I was commanded to stroke the burners of the stove, press my nose against the refrigerator door, and arrange the percolator, toaster, and blender into a straight row. After making my rounds of the living room, it was time to kneel beside the banister and blindly jab a button knife in the direction of my favorite electrical socket. There were bulbs to lick and bathroom faucets to test before finally I was free to enter my bedroom, where I would carefully align the objects of my dresser, lift the corners of my metal desk, and lie upon my bed, rocking back and forth and thinking of what an odd woman she was. My 3rd-grade teacher, Mrs. Chestnut. Why come here and lick my switches when she never used the one she had? Maybe she was drunk. Her note had asked if she might visit our home in order to discuss what she preferred to as my special problems. Have you been leaving your seat to lick the light switch?" my mother asked. She placed the letter upon the table and lit a cigarette. "Once or twice," I said. "Once or twice what? Every half hour? Every 10 minutes? "I don't know," I lied. "Who's counting?" "Well, your goddamned math teacher, for one. That's her job, to count." What? Do you think she's not going to notice?" "Notice what?" It never failed to amaze me that people might notice these things. Because my actions were so intensely private, I'd always assumed they were somehow invisible. When cornered, I demanded that the witness had been mistaken. "What do you mean, notice what? I got the phone call just this afternoon from that lady up the street, that Mrs. Keening, the one with the twins. She says she caught you in her front yard, down on your hands and knees, kissing the evening edition of her newspaper." "I wasn't kissing it. I was just trying to read the headline." "And you had to get that close. Maybe we need to get you some stronger glasses." "Well, maybe we do," I said. "And I suppose this Miss..." My mother unfolded the letter and studied the signature. "This Mrs. Chestnut is mistaken too? Is that what you're trying to tell me? Maybe she has you confused with the other boy who leaves his seat to lick the pencil sharpener or touch the flag or whatever the hell it is you do the moment her back is turned." "That's very likely," I said. "She's old. There are spots on her hands." "How many?" my mother asked. On the afternoon that Mrs. Chestnut arrived for a visit, I was in my bedroom, rocking. Unlike the obsessive counting and touching, rocking was not a mandatory duty, but a voluntary and highly pleasurable exercise. It was my hobby, and there was nothing else I would rather do. The point was not to rock oneself to sleep. This was not a step towards some greater goal. It was the goal itself. The perpetual movement freed my mind, allowing me to mull over things and construct elaborately detailed fantasies. Toss in a radio, and I was content to rock until 3 or 4 o'clock in that morning, listening to that hit parade and discovering that each and every song was about me. I might have to listen 200 or 300 times to the same song, but sooner or later, its private message would reveal itself. Because it was pleasant and relaxing, my rocking was bound to be tripped up, most often by my brain, which refused to allow me more than 10 consecutive minutes of happiness. At the opening chords of my current favorite song, a voice would whisper, "Shouldn't you be upstairs making sure there are really 114 peppercorns left in that small ceramic jar? And hey, while you're up there, you might want to check the iron and make sure it's not setting fire to the baby's bedroom." The lists of demands would grow by the moment. What about that television antenna? Is it still set into that perfect V, or has one of your sisters destroyed its integrity? I was just wondering how tightly the lid is screwed onto that mayonnaise jar. Let's have a look, shall we? I would be just on the edge of truly enjoying myself, this close to breaking the song's complex code, when my thoughts would get in the way. The trick was to bide my time until the record was no longer my favorite, to wait until it had slipped from its number 1 position on the charts and fool my mind into believing I no longer cared. I was coming to terms with the shadow of your smile when Mrs. Chestnut arrived. She rang the bell and I cracked open my bedroom door, watching as my mother invited her in. "You'll have to forgive me for these boxes." My mother flicked her cigarette out the door and into the littered yard. "They're filled with crap, every last one of them. But God forbid we throw anything away." "Oh no, we can't do that. My husband saved it all. Every last green stamp and coupon, every outgrowing bathing suit and scrap of linoleum. It's all right here along with the rocks and knotted sticks he swears look like just his old department head or associate district manager or some goddamn thing." She mopped at her forehead with a wadded paper towel. "Anyway, to hell with it. You look like I need a drink. Scotch, all right?" Mrs. Chestnut's eyes brightened. "I really shouldn't, but why not?" She followed my mother up the stairs. "Just a drop with ice, no water." I tried rocking in bed, but the sound of laughter drew me to the top of the landing, where from my vantage point behind an oversized wardrobe box, I watched the 2 women discuss my behavior. "Oh, you mean the touching," my mother said. She studied the ashtray that sat before her on the table, narrowing her eyes much like a cat catching sight of a squirrel. Her eyes of fixed concentration suggested that nothing else mattered. Time had stopped, and she was deaf to the sounds of the rattling fan and my sister's squabbling out in the driveway. She opened her mouth just slightly, running her tongue over her upper lip, and then she inched forward, her index finger prodding the ashtray as though it were a sleeping thing she was trying to awake. I had never seen myself in action, but a sharp, stinging sense of recognition told me that my mother's impersonation had been accurate. "Priceless," Mrs. Chestnut laughed, clasping her hands in delight. "Oh, that's very good. You've captured him perfectly. Bravo, I give you an A+. God only knows where he gets it from," my mother said. "He's probably down in his room right this minute, counting his eyelashes or blowing at the pulls on his dresser. 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, and he'll still be at it, rattling around the house to poke the laundry hamper or press his face against the refrigerator door. The kid's wound too tight, but he'll come out of it. So what do you say? Another scotch, Catherine?" Now she was Catherine. Another few drinks, and she'd probably be joining us for our summer vacation. How easy it was for adults to bond over a second round of cocktails. I returned to my bed, cranking up the radio so as not to be distracted by the sound of her cackling. Because Mrs. Chestnut was here in my home, I knew it was only a matter of time before the voices would order me to enter the kitchen and make a spectacle of myself. Maybe I would have to suck on the broom handle or stand on the table to touch the overhead light fixture. But whatever was demanded of me, I had no choice but to do it. The song that played on the radio posed no challenge whatsoever, the lyrics as clear as if I'd written myself. "Well, I think I'm going out of my head," the man sang. "Yes, I think I'm going out of my head." Following Mrs. Chestnut's visit, my father attempted to cure me with a series of threats. You touch your nose to that windshield one more time, and I'll guarantee you'll wish you hadn't," he said, driving home from the grocery store with a lap full of rejected out-of-state coupons. It was virtually impossible for me to ride in the passenger seat of a car and not press my nose against the windshield. And now that the activity had been forbidden, I wanted it more than anything. I tried closing my eyes, hoping that it might eliminate my desire, but found myself thinking that perhaps he was the one who should close his eyes. So what if I wanted to touch my nose to the windshield? Who was it hurting? Why was it that he could repeatedly worry his change and bite his lower lip without the threat of punishment? My mother smoked, and Mrs. Chestnut massaged her waist 20, 30 times a day. And here I couldn't press my nose against the windshield of a car? I opened my eyes, defiant, but when he caught me moving towards my target, my father slammed on the brakes. "You liked that, did you?" He handed me a golf towel to wipe the blood off my nose. "Did you like the feel of that?" Like was too feeble for what I felt. I loved it. If mashed with the right amount of force, a blow to the nose can be positively narcotic. Touching objects satisfied a mental itch, but the task involved a great deal of movement. Run upstairs, cross the room, remove a shoe. I soon found those same urges could be fulfilled within the confines of my own body. Punching myself in the nose was a good place to start, but the practice was dropped when I began rolling my eyes deep in their sockets, an exercise that produced quick jolts of dull, intoxicating pain. "I know exactly what you're thinking about," my mother said to Mrs. Chatz, my visiting fourth-grade teacher. "The eyes rolling every which way, it's like talking to a slot machine. Hopefully one day he'll pay off, but until then, what do you say we have ourselves another glass of wine?" "Hey, sport," my father said. If you're trying to get a good look at the contents of your skull, I can tell you right now that you're wasting your time. There's nothing there to look at, and these report cards prove it." He was right. I had my nose pressed to the door, the carpet, and the windshield, but not apparently to the grindstone. School held no interest whatsoever. I spent my days waiting to return to the dark bedroom of our new house, where I could roll my eyes, listen to the radio, and rock in peace. I took to violently shaking my head, startled by the feel of my brain slamming against the confines of my skull. It felt so good and took so little time. Just a few quick jerks, and I was satisfied for up to 45 seconds at a time. "Have a seat and let me get you something cool to drink." My mother would leave my 5th and then my 6th grade teachers standing in the breakfast nook while she stepped into the kitchen to crack open a tray of ice. "I'm guessing you're here about the head shaking, am I right?" she would shout. "That's my boy, all right. No flies on him." She suggested my teachers interpret my jerking head as a nod of agreement. "That's what I do, and now I've got him washing the dishes for the next 5 years. I ask, he yanks his head, and it's settled. Do me a favor, though, and just don't hold him after 5 o'clock. I need him at home to straighten up and make the beds before his father gets home." This was part of my mother's act. She played the ride-linger, blowing the whistle and charming the crowd with her jokes and exaggerated stories. When company came, she often pretended to forget the names of her 6 children. "Hey, George, or Anx, whatever your name is, how about running into the bedroom and fixing my cigarette lighter?" She noticed my tics and habits, but was never ashamed or seriously bothered by any of them. Her observations would be collected and delivered as part of a routine that bore little resemblance to our lives. "It's a real stretch, but I'm betting you here about the tiny voices," she said. offering a glass of sherry to my visiting 7th grade teacher. I'm thinking of either taking him to an exorcist or buying him a doll so he can bring home some money as a ventriloquist. It had come out of nowhere, my desperate urge to summon high-pitched noises from the back of my throat. These were not words, but sounds that satisfied an urge I'd never before realized. The sounds were delivered not in my voice, but in that of a thimble-sized terminal diver clinging to the base of my ulva. Evola. Me. I was a host to those wailings, but lacked the ability to control them. When I cried out in class, the teachers would turn from their backboards with increasingly troubled expressions. Is someone rubbing a balloon? Who's making that noise? I tried making up excuses, but everything sounded implausible. There's a bee living in my throat, or if I don't exercise my vocal cords every 3 minutes, there's a good chance I'll never solo again. The noise-making didn't replace any of my earlier habits. It was just another addition to what had become a freakish collection of tics. Worse than the constant yelps and twitchings was the fear that tomorrow might bring something even worse, like I would wake up with the urge to jerk other people's heads. I might go for days without rolling my eyes, but it would all come back the moment my father said, "See, I knew you could quit if you just put your mind to it. Now, if you can keep your head still and stop making those noises, you'll be set." Set for what, I wondered. Often while rocking, I would imagine my career as a movie star. There, I was attending the premiere beneath a floodlit sky, a satin scarf tied just so around my throat. I understood that most actors probably didn't interrupt the love scene to press their noses against the camera or wail a quick "ee-ah" during a dramatic monologue. But in my case, the word would be willing to make an exception. "This is a moving and touching film," the papers would report. "An electrifying, eye-popping performance that has audiences squealing and the critiques nodding, Oscar, Oscar, Oscar." I like to think that some of my nervous habits faded during high school, but my class pictures tell a different story. "Draw in the missing eyeballs and this one might not be so bad," my mother would say. In group shots, I was easily identified as the blur in the back row. For a time, I thought that if I accompanied my habits with an outlandish wardrobe, I might be viewed as eccentric rather than just plain retarded. I was wrong. Only a confirmed idiot would wander the halls of my high school dressed in a floor-length caftan. As for the countless medallions that hung from around my neck, I might as well have worn a cowbell. They clanged and jangled with every jerk of my head, calling attention when without them I might have passed unnoticed. My oversized glasses did nothing but provide a clearer view of my rolling, twitching eyes, and the clunky platform shoes left lumps when I used to discreetly tap my forehead. I was a mess. I could be wrong, but according to my calculations, I got exactly 14 minutes of sleep during my entire first year college. I'd always have had my own bedroom, a meticulously clean and well-ordered place where I could practice my habits in private. Now I would have a roommate, some complete stranger, spoiling my routine with his God-given right to exist. The idea was mortifying, and I arrived at the university in full tilt. The doctors told me that if I knock it around hard enough, there's a good chance the brain tumor would shrink to the point where I won't have to operate, I said the first time my roommate caught me jerking my head. Meanwhile, these other specialists have me doing these eye exercises to strengthen what they call the corneal fibers, whatever that means. They got me coming and going, but what can you do, right? Anyway, you go ahead and settle it. I think I'll just test this electrical socket with a butter knife and rearrange a few of my items on my dresser. Easy does it. That's what I always... It was hard enough coming up with excuses, but the real agony came when I was forced to give up rocking. "Give it a rest, Romero," my roommate moaned the first night he heard my bed springs creak. He thought I was masturbating, and while I wanted to set the record straight, something told me I wouldn't score any points by telling him that I was simply rocking in bed, just like any other 18-year-old college student. It was torture to lie there doing nothing. Even with a portable radio and earphones, there was no point listening to music unless I could sway back and forth with my head on a pillow. Rocking is basically dancing in a horizontal position, and it allowed me to practice in private what I detested in public. With my jerking head, rolling eyes, and rapid stabbing gestures, I might have been a sensation if I'd left my bed and put my tics to work on the dance floor. I should have told my roommate that I was an epileptic and left it at that. He might have charged across the room every so often to ram a popsicle stick down my throat, but so what? I was used to picking splinters out of my tongue. What, I wondered, was an average person expected to do while stretched out in a darkened room? I felt pointless to lie there motionless and imagine a brighter life. Squinting across the cramped cinder block cell, I realized that an entire lifetime of wishful thinking had gotten me no further than this. There would be no cheering crowds or esteemed movie directors shouting into their bullhorns. I might have to take this harsh reality lying down, but while attempting to do so, couldn't I rock back and forth just a little bit? Having memorized my roommate's course schedule, I took to rushing back to the room between classes, rocking my fitful spurts, but never really enjoying it, for fear he might return any moment. Perhaps he might feel ill, or decide to cut class at the last minute. I'd heard his key in the door and jump up from my bed, mashing down my wadded hair and grabbing one of the textbooks I kept on my prop table. I'm just studying for that pottery test, I'd say. That's all I've been up to, just sitting in this chair reading about the history of jugs. Hard as I tried, it always wound up sounding as if I were guilty of something secretive or perverse. He never acted in the least embarrassed when caught listening to one of his many heavy metal albums, a practice far more shameful than anything I have yet to imagine. There was no other solution. I had to think of a way to get rid of this guy. My biggest weakness appeared to be his girlfriend, whose photograph he had tacked in a place of honor above his stereo. They'd been dating since 10th grade, and while he had gone off to college, she stayed behind to attend a 2-year nursing school in their hometown. A history of listening to top 40 radio had left me with a ridiculous and cliched notion of love. I had never entertained the feeling myself, but knew that it meant never having to say you're sorry. It was a many-splendid thing. Love was a rose and a hammer, both blind and all-seeing, and made the world go around. My roommate thought that he and his girlfriend were strong enough to make it through the month without seeing each other, but I wasn't so sure. I don't know that I would trust her around all those doctors, I said. Love fades when left untended, especially in a hospital environment. Absence might make their heart grow fonder, but love is a two-way street. Think about it. When my roommate went out of town, I would spend the entire weekend rocking in bed and fantasizing about his tragic car accident. I envisioned him wrapped tight as a mummy, his arms and legs suspended by pulleys. Time is a great healer, his mother would say, packing the last of his albums into a milk crate. 2 years of bed rest, and he'll be good as new. Once he gets out of the hospital, I'll set him up in the living room. He likes it there. Sometimes I would allow him to leave in one piece, imagining his joining the army or marrying his girlfriend, moving someplace warm and sunny like Peru or Ethiopia. The important thing was that he leave his room and never come back. I'd get rid of him and then move on to the next person, and the one after that, until it was just me, rocking and jerking in private. 2 months into the semester, my roommate broke up with his girlfriend, and I'm going to spend every day and night sitting right here in this room until I figure out where I went wrong. He dabbed his moist eyes with the sleeve of his flannel shirt. You and me, little buddy. Just you and me. And dress very tall from here and out. Say, what's with your head? That the old tuber acting up again? College is the best thing that can ever happen to you, my father used to say, and he was right. For it was there that I discovered drugs, drinking, and smoking. I'm unsure of the scientific aspects, but for some reason, my nervous habits faded about the same time I took up with cigarettes. Maybe it was coincidental, or perhaps the tics retreated in the face of an adversary that, despite its health risks, is much more socially acceptable than crying out in tiny voices. Were I not smoking, I'd probably be on some sort of medication that would cost the same amount of money, but deny me the accoutrements, the lighters I can thoughtlessly open and close, the ashtrays that provided me with a legitimate reason to leave my chair, and the cigarettes that calmed me down while giving me something to do with my hands and mouth. It's as if I had been born to smoke, and until I realized it, my limbs were left to search for some alternative. Everything's fine as long as I know there's a cigarette in my immediate future. The people who ask me not to smoke in their cars have no idea what they're in for. Remember when you used to roll your eyes, my sisters ask? Remember the time you shook your head so hard your glasses fell into the barbecue pit? At their mention, I sometimes attempt to revisit my former tics and habits. Returning to my apartment late at night, I'll dare myself to press against the doorknob or roll my eyes to achieve that one satisfying ache. Maybe I'll start counting the napkins sandwiched in their plastic holder, but the exercise lacks its old urgency, and I soon lose interest. I would no sooner rock in bed than play Up, Up and Away 60 times straight on my record player. I could easily listen to something else an equal number of times while seated in a rocking chair, but the earlier, bedridden method forbids to comfort me, as I've forgotten the code, the twitching trick needed to decipher the lyrics to that particular song. I remember only that one time the story involved the citizens of Raleigh, North Carolina, being herded into a test balloon of my own design and making. It was rigged to explode once it reached the city limits, but the passengers were unaware of that fact. The sun shone on their faces as they lifted their heads towards the bright blue sky, giddy with excitement. Beautiful balloon, they all said, gripping the handrails and climbing the staircase to their fiery destiny. Wouldn't you like to ride? Sorry, folks, I'd say, pressing my nose against the surface of my ticket booth, but I got other duties.